When I was a kid, my cousins came to visit us in Colorado Springs, and we went out for pizza. And my oldest cousin asked what all the lights were out on that field that we saw when we were driving in, and my parents told her that it was a light farm where they grew light bulbs. And she believed them for like a year. She was 10. No, she was 12. I was 10. Yeah. So on that note, let's talk about Power Grid. What that field of light bulbs was in actuality was an airport, which is why I'm recording this Power Grid review in an airport. Also, I just happen to be in an airport, and I need to record a review. Now, of course, I couldn't get out on the runway and film on the light bulb farm part, so we're just gonna make do with this. Power Grid is a territory economy game, I guess, Power Grid is an economy game and probably the only game with paper money and little wooden houses that I actually enjoy. It's by Fredman Fries, and it's 2 to 6 players and it's a base game. There's several expansions now that you can buy with different maps and robots and stuff like that, but we're just going to talk about the base game because really the base game is a solid game in itself. But we're just going to talk about the base game because the base game is a solid game in and of itself. It's a double-sided board with the US on one side and Germany on the other. Well, mainly this is most likely because the game is from a German designer, so it makes sense. In Power Grid, you and your friends are each running power companies, and you buy power plants for your power companies, and then you install substations in cities across the map for your power companies, and then you buy resources for your power companies. In Power Grid, you and your friends are owning power companies, and you buy power plants for your companies, you buy the resources to fuel the power plants for the companies, and then you build substations around the map to provide power to cities and thus get paid for your, well, power. And at the end of the game, the winner is whoever can power the most cities in the final round. What this means is that even if you have built the most substations around the map, if you don't have the power plants or the fuel to actually power everything you've built, doesn't mean a lot because the winner is the one who can actually power everything and the most things. What I just described is basically the 3 phases of the game. What I just described is basically the 3 rounds that take place every turn, round, phase thing of the game. I guess round would make sense. So yeah, you as a power company, the first thing you do is you make a bid for a power plant at the beginning of the game, and this power plant will stick with you until you are managed to upgrade. But you just can't buy the power plant, you have to bid on it. So you place an opening bid, 4 for 4, and then it goes around the table and people can up your bid and buy that power plant out from under your feet. The power plants all use different energy types, and they all power different amounts of subsidies. So 2 coal would power 2 houses or something like that. And the more expensive the power plant, generally the more efficient it gets. But in the early game, you're going to want cheaper ones because, well, but in the beginning of the game, you're only going to want cheaper ones because, well, you start kind of broke and you still have to buy resources to fuel your power plants, which are kind of inefficient, and you still have to build substations because you don't start the game with any substations. Maybe you do. Maybe I've been playing wrong. I can't remember. So at the beginning of the game, after everybody has bought their first power plants, then they buy resources for those power plants. And the resources are coal, oil, trash, or radium. And coal starts most in abundance, but then later, at the end of every round, when the resources restock, coal becomes more and more rare. And so eventually at the end of the game, if people are consuming a lot of coal, you'll actually just run out of coal. But all the other resources will produce, and trash will become really popular / abundant. And so it's a very interesting game in that you're dealing with money as far as bidding and auctions, and so it's based on your players and balancing and stuff like that. Then you also have the economy of the market for resources, and this economy scales really well even for large-scale games of 6 players. Because the resource demand, there's a nice little chart on the board that says how much resources are, and the more there is of a resource, the cheaper it is. So as one resource becomes more in demand, it becomes more expensive, especially if you're the one buying last. And this is the fun part of Power Grid. In Power Grid, turn order is determined by who has the most substations built. And then if there's ties, it's whoever has the most expensive power plant. And then this is where stuff gets really cool. If you are first in the turn order, that means you get to bid on a power plant first. So maybe you'll get what you want, or maybe people will outbid you and drive the prices up and you'll get stuck paying too much for something you really wanted, maybe not wanted that much. Then the resources and the building of the substations actually starts with the last player and goes forward. So if you're last, you actually have an advantage for being last when it comes to buying resources, because you get the cheapest resources, and then you're forcing the person who has the most money, who's in first most likely, because then you're forcing the person in last place gets to buy resources first, which means they get to buy the resources the cheapest, which means they'll drive up prices for people that are in first or just ahead of them. This is a great balancing act, because it's probably assumed that if somebody's in first, it's because they built the most substations, which means they're powering the most factories. This is a great balancing thing, because it assumes that if somebody is in first, they have more substations, which they should, and that means they're powering more cities, which means they're getting more money. So if they have to spend more money for resources because they're buying stuff that's already been bought out, it automatically balances out so they lose more money, which is great. It solves a runaway leader problem. The other cool thing about Power Grid and its resource market is that throughout the game, resources swing from being coal and oil being the cheapest. The other thing that I think is really cool about Power Grid is that throughout the game, the resources swing from coal and oil being the cheapest, which of course are the least environmentally friendly things, to garbage and uranium being the most abundant and cheapest. And the power plants reflect that. So less uranium powers more houses, and less garbage powers more houses as well. There's even a few clean energy power plants in the game, like windmills and one hydro plant, which I've never actually had come into play, which is a tragedy because it's amazing. Okay, so I've talked about buying power plants, and I've talked about the buying of the power plants somewhat, and I've talked about the resource market, which is one of my favorite things about Power Grid. Now let's talk about the map. So if you're looking at the game and you look at the map, you're like, oh my goodness, this is like every large boring game ever. I've played Ticket to Ride, why would I want to play this game where the map looks basically exactly the same? Except for it's not, because instead of building train routes, you're building in the cities. And the cool thing is that there's a limitation to how many people can build in the cities and how you can spread once you start. So at the beginning of the game, each city will cost you $10 to settle in, and then you have to pay a connection fee to go to the next city, and you have to spread out from your own network. If you ever need to skip a city because somebody's already built there, then you have to pay a double connection fee, so you have to pay the first one and then go through again. Then in phase 2, or step 2, the rulebook is inconsistent because it's probably translated from German. But in phase 2, it's $15 to build into a city, unless nobody's built there yet, which means it's $10. Then in phase 3, it's $20 to build into a city. And so as your power company grows, oh, hang on. Not me. Never me. Okay, so as the power companies get more powerful and start spreading, you actually run into a restriction where you maybe can't afford to spread because you're being blocked by your opponents, which is a valid strategy to block your opponents and try to cluster them so they have to spend so much money to get out and spread. The other way that you can restrict the map, and actually the game recommends, is that you just block off certain regions of the map to equal the number of players. Well, no, you have the number of regions available that equals the number of players. There we go. So while there's no direct competition in this game, there is still a lot of stuff that you can do to mess with your opponents. You can outbid them for power plants that you just want to raise the price on because you know they really want, or you can buy out resources, or you can even just book maps and block them and build substations that you may not even be able to power for several turns, but you'll still be able to block out your opponents with. The only random elements of Power Grid is what comes up from the Power Grid. The only random element in Power Grid is what comes up from the power plant. And because you're bidding on your power plant yourself, that even doesn't affect the game drastically. It does enough that every play is different, but it doesn't make it so that you will get completely screwed over if you just don't have a power plant come up. There's multiple options, you can see what's coming, and then you can bid and plan and strategize. This is enough of a randomization to make plays different, like I said, between games. But it's not enough that it makes me feel like the game is just useless. This is a solid economy game, and while yes, it has paper money, which is an instant turn off for a lot of people, and it has a US map that looks very similar to Ticket to Ride and any other game that has a US map, it's still a great economy game, and it's a great gateway economy game because it's really easy for people to pick up and play. If they know the US and they're familiar with Ticket to Ride or even Monopoly, it's a great economy game step up. And once I introduced my family to this game, like, Monopoly is out the window completely. Oh. So I highly recommend Power Grid if you have a family that likes the economy factor of Monopoly, but maybe not the random, like, roll the dice bit of Monopoly, or maybe you don't like that part and you want them to get them into, or maybe you didn't like that part and you want to get them into a better game. Power Grid is a great economy game. It's, every play is different. You get to actually control the market with resources and have biddings and auctions, and it's great. I really like this game, and I know a lot of people that really invest in this game because there's a lot of maps. There's like tons of maps of different countries, and you can just always expand. There's different decks of power grids that you can get. There's different decks of power plants you can get if you and your family get like too memorized with those ones, or you just want something new and interesting. So yeah, there's lots of options with this game. And as a matter of fact, I believe the deluxe edition just came out for like North America and Europe, I think. Can't remember exactly. But I definitely will be looking at getting the deluxe edition for Christmas this year for my family because we play that game quite a bit. We play Ticket to Ride and Power Grid the most, actually. So yeah, that right there should be enough of a sign for you. And while I generally like chunkier, more intense Euro games, Power Grid is enough of a brain burner for me to satisfy me. Like, it's not worker placement and it's not like intense braining, but it's a nice thinker of a game. I don't know. I think it works. I enjoy playing it. I'm always up for a game, and yeah, I think maybe you'll enjoy it too if you like economy games. As far as ages, I honestly don't know. I'd go with what the box recommends, which I don't know off the top of my head. So yeah, now I'm gonna continue waiting for another delayed flight because that's always what I do. That's the story of my life. Oh well. If you like this video, feel free to hit the thumbs up button. If you'd like to see more, feel free to subscribe. And as always, what are you playing? Right, time to go wait on a delayed flight again. If you like this video, feel free to hit the thumbs up button. If you'd like to see more, feel free to subscribe. And as always, what are you playing? Oh, puppy! Did you guys see the puppy? Did it get the puppy? I wish Ichi could be a service dog. She could not, though. She could never be so stoic. She just loves people too much.